We're talking about data that we've collected from the entries for the next work environment competition for 2021.
Yeah.
And so, Jian, what Survature has done here is essentially pulled together all of the submissions, the input from all of the registrants. And what we're looking at here are patterns that the data is showing and how people are thinking about the workplace today.
Yes, you're right, Bob. What we did as an innovation is in the application form, made it a data collection for the community to express what they see as the top problems and what they see as the top solutions. And it is trying to connect the dots in two unexpected ways. The first is we want to see, are there naturally emerging clusters of new ideas among a few where we just have so many new ideas. And the second is within this big space of potential solutions, what are the trends where the community together feel ought to be the right solution to apply to a new problem? So with all of that, the outcome is quite surprising, and it's quite exciting too to talk about those.
So what you're really getting at here is essentially we've kind of got the collective groupthink, if you will, of where the registrants are all thinking about the workplace.
You're exactly right. Only that now we're using the word groupthink in a very positive way.
Is there an overarching theme that has emerged from this?
If you look at any individual designer's work, they are usually very, very focused on one problem because that's what good design comes. But if you look at what the designers collectively see, it is showing something that's beyond what individual designers probably have known. So that's where I think the data is suggesting there are actually new knowledge being generated right now in a very, I'm going to say, a chaotic, but using that wording in a positive way again, in the chaotic world right now. And there are common thinkings that may be interesting to every single designer because no one can see right now beyond what they individually see.
Well, innovation is messy and requires a diverse number of ideas in order for new things to emerge. So this should be fun.
Well, connecting the dots in ways that never seemed obvious is something that we see in the data. So the first thing is what's new in this application form. So how are we collecting all of these information, right? So coming very quickly to here. So now this is actually one of the biggest changes we did this year, and last year we didn't attempt this. So last year we put together, so Bob, you put together the first draft, and then Michelle worked on it, and then we all contributed. But it ended up being a rather small set of themes, like I'm gonna say it's between 5 to 7. And then within the themes, each submission has to pick one, say, hey, this is where I fit. And just the application went on from there. But this year, it's very intriguing that we tried this and the outcome is very interesting. So we say, hey, every submission, you can now pick from this very long list of many, many things, a primary category. And then this same list repeats where you can say, hey, so is there a secondary category for your submission? And then after that, then is there a third category of your submission? So in a way, we are wanting to maximize the chance for a submission to be reviewed for different categories of awards, right? But then the outcome is we are getting from these submissions a web of knowledge of what a single solution could solve as multiple categories of problems. So what we found is quite surprising. So not wanting to go through all of the nerdy data analysis, just want to say on the top level, we're seeing groupings. A topic such as office building, it is as important as before, only that now it is associated with topics such as collaboration, such as common and shared amenities, and such as flex work. If we go beyond office building, we say, hey, just what about real estate deals, right? Which is a very important topic in the field. And we put it as actually the top of the list. It is not necessarily associated with office buildings. It is most often associated with common shared amenities and technology. So where is technology here? Right. So, and then this suggests that the community together is showing some groupthink. We see these are the most related issues that need a solution. Right. And then when it comes to common shared amenities, of course, it's related to flex work, it's related to office building. There is a very singular term that is not associated with anything else, but only associated with office building, that is metrics. And then we chatted about that before, and there are very good reasons that metrics as a field now is being disrupted. So traditional metrics don't work anymore. But if you talk about metrics, why does it matter? It is related to how office buildings are going to be used. So thereby we see a group, we call it the prototype A, right? So, or the archetype A. These are the top issues. And they are office building, real estate deals, common shared amenities, and metrics. And then the related items are flex work, collaboration, and technology. So it's not a surprise to see technology being an important term now, but to see that be so closely related to the office building real estate deals, that's actually very interesting. And then for another example, and we also see a very tight collaboration cluster, so the center around collaboration, and it is really just collaboration and flex work. So when thinking about how all of these are important, well, it goes without saying. But to say that these two are so closely related, nothing else are nearly as related except office building. So that's an exciting thing for designers because while things are really being changed. So is it actually about hospitality and food? Is it actually about team performance? Is it actually about change management? If you ask any individual, we will say, hey, probably they're related. But based on all of the submissions where people are competing to win, right? So then you identify the most compelling relationships. They didn't identify those. They identified collaboration, flex work, but in the context of office building. Big data was an intriguing one. We discussed why it is in the list, and there's huge strategic reason for it. But from the outcome point of view, big data was a little blip. It's almost like noise. The design community did not really latch on to the word big data. Technology was a much better fit. I guess the broader interpretation is technology is often seen as the enabling thing for the occupants, and it includes many things. It's not just to create metrics. So big data here, it doesn't have that kind of fully empowering kind of notion to it. And then what is also a surprise to me is there was no strong relationship as the community in the groupthink between big data and metrics. One thing that's compelling now is under so much change, if you look at immediate term needs, metrics are about metrics. It's about utilization. And there is not a whole lot of understanding of the human behavior side at all. With the Delta variant causing so many last minute changes, when people's behavior change, whatever you assumed as the big data probably aren't as applicable anymore. If a pandemic caused another thing, it is people are more used to working from home now. Home is the environment where you really have the psychological safety, right? So I am home, I'm not being watched. So to say going back into the office building and then there is big data, actually, it is not only uncomfortable for the occupants, it's uncomfortable for the designers. So there is that disconnection too. There were a lot of submissions in the category of furniture, but furniture largely stood all by itself. The furniture, it is a little bit more independent And then it is very clear what their problems were. It is very clear what their solutions are. But the rest of the design field seemed to be more like, okay, what are the redefining problems and what are the redefining solutions? And that's a very interesting thing. All right, culture is a big term. And then I want to say before the pandemic, culture and community was I want to say a secondary term. In A&D, in the design world, I think productivity was the big one. But culture and community was always considered as important, but it was not like a primary term. But in this round, culture and community was very interesting. It became a little bit of a hub all by itself. It is the only cluster that goes beyond office building and work from home. So the collaboration, flex work, and office building, real estate deals, those are office building centric. Culture and community goes beyond that. So it is office building, work from home, flex work, well-being, and technology. We as a generation, actually, we as the global community do not understand how to build effective work community if everything's online. No one has ever experienced that. Well, this is probably the new frontier of workplace design. Yeah, because before it's about productivity, and now we quite often hear about the gap between return to the office because employees as a whole probably don't want to return to office, but management overall want their team to return to office because they can feel I'm finally engaged with my team again. We can talk about all of the important issues that's beyond the day-to-day. Say leadership development, say a work process improvement, anything that requires a little bit of a disagreement in the productive way are probably better in person. But then if we are avoiding all of the conflicts, just keep things ongoing, in that case, then whatever the subconscious consensus is on the team will gradually take hold. So it's a little hard to put the pulse on what is the overall culture and community. There is one particular one, so we discussed, it's very important to put in, it's the new toward solutions. We collectively really wondered, so what are we seeing even as possible? And then what are we seeing as needed? The interesting outcome is new toward solutions. It actually belongs to the overall cluster of community, the culture and community. But its own core is with flex work, well-being, and work from home. So if we say there is something that's completely new to the world, it is about well-being, it is about work from home, it is about flex work. And then how does the new toward solutions tie back into office building? We anticipated there should be a relationship, but right now we're not seeing that. For the time being, the new to the world solution centers around well-being, flex work, and work from home. And then collaboration is not part of it, so it's a little strange. Technology is actually not necessarily part of it. And common and shared amenities is not necessarily part of it. Furniture is not necessarily part of it. So that's a very surprising thing. But I think if we revisit this in a year, we're going to see something very different. We saw some compelling patterns between the US and then the rest of the global community. But we also saw similarly compelling things between professionals and students. They see the world in very different, under very different lights. And also we saw how the project type affected things. Because there are some projects that are actual client projects. There are some projects that are by professionals, but they're theoretical. And we see also, of course, student projects. So this is the data product that we call the complete profile report. And then this is a result of Survature being a tool that can collect in a passive manner the group psychology. So this is a very simple question. It's about what are the workplace problems that you're trying to solve? So how strongly does your submission target the following workplace problems? And then in here, we have a few of the common terms. So workplace performance, workplace pride, as we mentioned, were before pandemic. And then we added a few that we think are potentially important, like workplace health, human connectedness, which we discovered as a keyword for problem from last year's global design competition. These are, let's say, a new way to get the problem definition from the community. Any one person could say, hey, I'm going to drag this into this box. I'm going to drag this into this box. Only that this application form is also getting information of what are the items that are most commonly picked, what are the items that are most commonly picked early. So in the way on the back end, the AI uses the probability to predict for this group of people, what are the collective top priorities. So if we have to borrow a academic term from psychology, we would borrow the word hierarchy of needs, which is a term that was coined 50 years ago. It was typically used for very abstract things, like all the way up to self-actualization. But in this case, we have very specific terms. That is, what are the top problems? And we as a community, what are our shared hierarchy of perception of what are the most important problems, or what problems matter the most? And after this, we try to ask them again. So now, okay, for a problem that you have identified, what are the solutions that you are providing? So in this case, is it an open design solution? Is it a reconfigurable solution? Is this a health and mindfulness solution? Is this hygiene and cleanliness solution? The same framework is applicable here. The items are going to be put in here by the user completely freely. And then in this case, the tool is getting the behavior that'll tell us in a very passive manner. It is actually behavior that's very natural to human being. What are the things we care about the most? And so collectively speaking, what do we see as the most important solutions out there? What we found are how these items combine together. It provides very powerful overall patterns. So again, we say groupthink, but it's under the most positive light we can find. As you've seen inside the question that we call answer cloud, there are many, many items. For the USA submissions versus international submissions, only the most important problem statements are identified. Only the most important solutions are identified. In this case, the cells identified in light yellow, these are the so-called niche priorities, meaning only this category care about, the other category doesn't. All right? So now let's see this. In the US, the problems that people see are still kind of traditional problems, right? So how can we be productive? And how can we have workplace performance? In this case, the international submissions, they care about those two, workplace performance and productivity on the individual basis. But then the next two are niche priorities. These are very different. In the US, we really care about workplace engagement, and we really care about human connectedness. And then on the international side, and primarily these international submissions are Europe and Canada, and in this case, workplace wellness and team productivity. We can hypothesize a few things. One is productivity on the team side used to be very important on the US side too, before the pandemic. But right now, it is being overtaken by workplace engagement overall, which is almost like an HR term, and then the human connectedness. And so this is a reconfirmation from last year's discovery. Human connectedness matter a lot. But on the European side is on the wellness side. So it's not so much an HR term. It is more a individual. So do I feel well? And but then we as a team still need to feel productive. Yeah, and these are the problem statements. And then on the solution side, it's okay. You always have the solution to solve your problem. And the number one solution that the US side is actually providing is space utilization, which is easily confirmed if you follow the current literature in the field, especially on the US side. But this being highlighted in light yellow means this is a niche priority, meaning then the international side, they don't care about it at all. They care about focus, collaborative activity, and health and mindfulness, right? And then these happen to be the same three that the US side also care about. But then the thing that's replaced from space utilization is social interaction. workplace wellness is more tied to social interaction. So in that case, we can draw that almost straight line. This side, I want to say for me, it's a very interesting insight is before the pandemic, when people talk about workplace wellness, quite often the first thing you jump to are the amenities, right? Is there a yoga place, and is there a mother's room? But actually, on the from the designer's point of view, and I think this is in the designer's collective subconscious, it is not the amenities because they're not available anymore. It is the social interaction. We need to see each other, interact with people who we have the psychological safety with to be well. And so this story of how amenity suddenly is not going to serve wellness, but the community very quickly together came up with a relationship that's with social interaction. I think that's actually one of the coolest things that the global design competition have done, because you now can see the global mindset. On this side, I totally would agree with you, Bob. That is the workplace engagement. It is a very important thing on the US side for the how the US side have been operating. And I've seen stats that says the workplace, the corporate real estate space side quite often is like the number 2 expense of a company. And so if that's the case, I guess there is still a shared mindset where space utilization is somehow connected with everybody in the mind with workplace engagement. So if people are engaged, then our space ought to be utilized. But then in that case, then we see the community mind bifurcating in the US side and in the international context. And switch to category, pro versus students. We have a similar result there. And so in this case, I'm going to come over here. So the similar breakdown in the framework of a complete profile report. And so these are, well, everything was automatic. There's no manual twiddling. This is exactly what the data shows. And with so many of these cells identified as light yellow, that says these are all niche priorities, meaning the other category doesn't care about. So the student mindset is basically detached from the professional mindset. The only common ground is individual productivity, which is easy to explain. On the professional side, workplace engagement, team productivity, and human connectedness, these are the top of mind of what are the key problems now. And then on the student side, workplace performance. And then, of course, in this case, these are, I want to say, from rather recent academic literature, health and wellness. So in a way, we can say the students are probably a little bit more closer to the leading edge of thinking because they are seeing all of those discussion. But then the professionals, they are actually seeing the customer needs. And they are more often in the field feeling what are the top problems. So workplace engagement is not a thing that the student understood as the most important. On the professional side, human connectedness is almost like the more condensed definition of wellness and health. It's more mental than there are more physical. So that's a very powerful thing for me. So in this case, space utilization is a shared priority on both sides. But then the solution students are creating are health and mindfulness, open design, and social distance. But then on the pro side, there's no social distance. It's actually really about social interaction, and it is about focus and also collaboration. So these are more of the traditional bread and butter need to offer in practical workspace. But in this case, seeing social interaction on this side, it is actually not so much just for the workplace engagement, because based on data, we've already seen that it's actually tied to wellness, right? But on this side, it is more direct. It's like, hey, we need to offer health. We need to offer social distance. But then in this case, I guess open design, it is still popular to among the student population. The next one I chose for this interaction is to talk about different kinds of projects. Some projects are actual client projects, some are theoretical, and some are student projects. And we're going to see how the most intriguing thing that I find is just depending on what the project is, people are seeing different differences in what the problems are the more compelling. So each column is a complete different mindset, only that the left and the middle are both by professionals, only that when I have the freedom to theorize, what are the problems I want to solve? So here you see on the professional side, a shared mindset, the team productivity, workplace wellness, and human connectedness. These for commissioned projects, these are not a surprise as how clients may have defined the problem, right? Because someone's paying for it, and then the company needs, there's quite a bit of momentum that carried from before the pandemic. Human connectedness was a big one that emerged last year. It's confirmed again. It is still important. But then if it's an actual one, workplace engagement is number one. But when the designers get to theorize, guess what? The thing that they replaced it with is workplace health. So this is a completely new problem, never existed as the top one. But suddenly the designers are not only tasked with shaping human experience. It's almost like having to shape how humans are protected. And I don't think that's a thing that's ever taught or discussed in the design school. But now the designers are together picking that up as, okay, if I have to theorize, what is the new mission we can take on for our profession? Right. So I find that to be really exciting. And I didn't expect this. On the solution side, space utilization is just burnt into the pros mind. So we had to solve that. But then the actual project, and this is the most interesting thing, distributed work. This is the only category where distributed work showed up as a solution. It is not a term that's actually talked about a lot right now. I see in the literature a lot of mention of in-person work versus work from home. We see a lot of discussion of telework. We see a lot of people talking about build the technology so that co-workers can interact together and collaborate. But as a mode of work, to literally have this term be top of mind, distributed work, it's actually a model. And then the opposite side of distributed work is centralized work. So obviously centralized work is a little hard now, so people pick their term called remote work. Distributed work on the collective subconscious showing up as the top thing. Maybe that is a better description of where the field is going. Remote suggests you're not here, and you probably don't belong here in a subconscious way. But distributed work suggests it is distributed. And collaborative activity, if you put it in the context of distributed work, very compelling for designers to study. We want to solve this problem of human connectedness. We want to provide wellness and engagement, and of course, productivity. But then together, the solution side is distributed work and collaborative activity. And when we get together, we want to have open design because we want human connectedness. But overall, this creates a lot of design challenges, which the submissions have done a great job to address. We, of course, already know a completely open design is not the best thing for productivity because of all of the distractions. So how do you balance what is distraction? What is actually human connectedness? That's a very interesting thing. How do you balance workplace engagement with distributed work? That's a very interesting thing. And how do you balance space utilization put side by side with distributed work? Finding these dots that are connected is basic step one, right? It doesn't solve any of the problems. It identifies this is where the field is going. On the theoretical side, if we're theorizing workplace health, and then what are we really saying? It's social interaction and social presence and focus. Being able to finish tasks on hand requires focus. But then for my mental health, I actually desire human interaction. I desire the feeling that my colleagues are present. But again, in this case, okay, how do I get focus together with interaction and presence? this is a very, very intriguing thing. So I guess the designers are together picking a very hard problem. But again, the connection to tie workplace health and interpret more on the mental side, this is new. Thought leaders in the field can theorize about a lot of future directions. It's an exciting time. Today, health and the human connectedness, right? See a new interpretation of what health is. It doesn't mean everybody get to go out and jog. It really doesn't mean that. So that's a completely new thing. On the student side, we see team bonding as a niche priority when they define problem. And I think this reflects actually leading thoughts in the academic world. The students are the only ones that really are still thinking about health and mindfulness and reconfigurable. So I want to talk about this a little bit. Last year, when we did the global design competition, we saw configurable as a top solution across the board. It's everywhere. But this year, not so much. The students are still thinking about it, but the pros have moved on. People are understanding that it's a space that has to be a staying solution, not so much like, hey, the users, you go create a solution. So I see that distinct thing. So last year, there was a feeling that we don't know what the solution is. So we're going to design a space where you, the user, can change and find ways to suit everything to you. In that context, for designers to now ask the question of what is a lasting solution in this world filled with uncertainty, I don't think that's ever considered for the design school. But based on what we're seeing, it should be. With so much uncertainty, what's a lasting solution? But then thinking of this from not as a reconfigurable solution where we do band-aid solutions, that makes the submission even more exciting to look through and think through.
Let me ask you about the context of this data as it fits into the industry. This is a relatively small sample group. I'm just interested to get your take on how accurate or reliable it is relative to the entire market.
I have a short answer and a longish answer. The short answer is quite often when designers talk about design, it is one-on-one interview style. We discuss, we debate, and all of that. And actually, that's the best way to understand the thinking behind the design. There's no way that's better. What is a little bit of a shortcoming of that approach is many things are discussed to a point where it's a little hard to really dig into what are the intentional, purposeful discussion and what are items that just show up because my mind suddenly brought me there, right? The conversation took me there. So that's where it's a little hard to separate core issues from the by the way kind of issues. And then what Survature does is by observing how people interact with the answer cloud to see, hey, based on the data, are there patterns in how you talk about things? So in this case, it is not something that gets all the nuances from a discussion, but it's much more reliable to get a quantitative structure out of the conversations that have been observed. So in this case, I want to say this is more reliable than talking to 30 designers, but this can extract more reliable structures from your interviews. So in this case, I want to say it's probably more reliable. But the longish answer is, how does this represent the overall community's view? The participants that's coming in, they are a better representation of the global community than they are of any local community. And as we all know, overall global aggregate, it probably doesn't reflect any one local market. It doesn't. If someone needs to ask the core question, so what does this local market really prefer? So if we ask the question, what does the Silicon Valley really prefer? And what does Austin, Texas really prefer? That depends on a lot of things. But this overall framework we've used can be easily repeated for all of those. So in this case, the data reflects the global community mind. It probably doesn't reflect any local market. The exciting thing for me, though, is seeing these dots that are being connected in surprising ways. It helps us as a community ask big questions. What is the reason that the distributed work, collaborative activity and open design is tied together with space utilization. How do you even balance those? So this would be a long-term topic for the entire community to think about. I want to say how it represents the community's mind in actionable ways. No, it doesn't. But how it represents community mind in ways to help all of us theorize about the future, yes, it does.
Great, John, this has been great. I really appreciate you diving deep into this data and looking at all the different patterns and trends that you see kind of emerging as people are rethinking what the next iteration of their work environment is. Thanks to you and Survature, I think this has been fascinating to walk through and see all the nuance to how people are thinking about the workplace today.
Well, this is really exciting time for Survature too, because we created a tool that looks like a survey, but is really coming out psychology. If there is a time where we need to have a better pulse of the community's overall psychology to really get a better glimpse of where do we go in the future, now is the time. So yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to work with work design for so many years. Yeah, looking forward to future opportunities.
Cool.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
All right, great.
Thanks, Jian.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
See ya.